All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the ECH trade deadline special. This is our first ever live stream, so bear with us if we have any sort of technical issues. Hi, everybody. Welcome. How you doing today, RJ?
Doing good. Doing good. Excited for a hopefully action-packed trade deadline day. Yeah, it's been a little slow this morning, but I'm sure stuff's going to pick up.
Yeah. A lot of some of the bigger names that we all had on our radar, it seemed like they moved yesterday, namely Taylor Hall. So I guess we could just start going over some of the trades so far. Not much related to the Kraken. Obviously, no deals done with them yet, but we wouldn't really expect that till closer to the expansion draft anyway.
Right, and Ron Francis did go on TSN's Trade Center, and he didn't really say a whole lot of to indicate what they're talking about, but he did mention that the Kraken's final payment to the league should be completed by the end of the month, which is kind of what we were thinking.
Yeah.
So hopefully that still goes along as scheduled.
Yeah. So, which of those big trades from yesterday you want to talk about first? You want to go in order?
Oh,
Or
yeah, let's go in order.
All right. So, well, one of the ones I found interesting was between the Sabres and the Panthers early on in the day, and that was Buffalo traded Brandon Montour to Florida for a third-round pick. Obviously, Florida without Ekblad having some issues on the blue line as far as depth goes. I've always thought Montour was good, not great. I never understood Buffalo giving up basically a first-round pick for him when he was with Anaheim. I then really didn't understand when Buffalo signed him to that contract that they signed him to. But I like this move for the Panthers. I think he's a solid second pairing guy, and I think he should help them out. And I think that price is fair.
Exactly. I think that's the key. The price is right now. Mm-hmm. And they needed to do something to shore up the blue line after losing Ekblad. And you can tell by their moves, they're still feeling confident about this season.
Yeah,
They're not ready to give up on it yet, just because they've lost Ekblad, as much of a crushing blow as that is. You know,
right. And they shouldn't, because
right.
they're still a top team even without him.
And especially for a team like the Panthers, I mean, you have to chase whatever kind of success you can get. It reminds me of when the Blue Jackets kind of went all in a couple of years ago at the deadline,
Yeah,
trading everything for, Duchesne and keeping Panarin and Bobrovsky. Just with where your franchise has been,
yeah,
you have to go chase that success, because it really is now or never.
yeah, for sure. Um, Another like kind of depth move, but it involved, I would consider a recognizable name, and that was Colorado trading for Devin Dubnyk from San Jose. Um,
Yep.
I liked that move for Colorado. Just helps shore up the goalie position. You don't want something happening to Grubauer as you're, finally a legitimate cup contender.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the Jonas Johansson trade, because they went for a goalie first
Mm-hmm.
already, and I think they realize he got a shutout recently, but I think they realize it's they need more insurance there, and I think it's a good move for them.
Yeah, and then the first kind of big trade was a 3-team deal involving Columbus, Detroit, and Tampa Bay. Ultimately, Tampa Bay got David Savard from Columbus for a first and a third round pick. Um, I like that move for Tampa. Again, David Savard's like, he's one of the best defensive defensemen that there is out there right now. Um, the analytics are good for him. He's not going to be some outstanding guy in Tampa Bay, but they don't exactly need him to be. I think this helps shore up their their second pairing, or even their third pairing. That can stick him down there, and then they don't have to worry about running out potentially Cal Foot.
Right.
If they're worried that that's going to be an issue during a playoff run. So I liked that. I thought the price was a little steep given what he is.
Well, here's the thing with the Lightning. They have kind of identified a newer way to go about the trade deadline. And I think you've seen the Leafs do it this year too, where you identify what exactly you feel your team needs, not necessarily who the best player out there is, but what you think is the closest to exactly what you need. And then you go pay whatever it costs for that, whether it's a first round pick or whatever it is. Like the Lightning acquired, Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow, where those weren't necessarily the most skilled players, last year at the deadline, but they knew that specific element is what they needed.
Yeah.
And it worked out well for them. And they paid a first round pick for Barclay Goodrow, but they won a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
So I think they're banking on something similar here.
Yeah, and as we all know, if you win, it's all worth it. You're talking about a team that their first round pick is going to be basically a second rounder anyway.
Exactly.
It's so late. Let's see. After
We got Puck Place Market in the chat. I just want to shout him out. What's up, fellas?
Yeah,
Hey there.
how's it going?
Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. So I guess then the first big deal trade, the one that like first kind of broke Twitter when it happened, was involved Columbus again. This time trading Nick Foligno to Toronto for a first and a fourth round pick, and that via San Jose, just to help money work all the way down the line. I actually really like this trade for Toronto, and I know a lot of people were, surprised at how high the price was, but I thought that was a pretty good deal for Toronto, because I think Foligno is going to do what he's always done, which is he's just going to be a nice, steady, even presence for them. He's going to be a guy that you can slide into the top six if you need to, just to help out defensively, help out, ultimately Toronto's problem every playoffs for the last 5 years has been that they kind of just collapse. They'll have issues defensively, they'll have issues keeping a high level of competitiveness, I guess I'll say, or a high compete level.
Right.
And I think he perfectly fixes all of those issues for them. So
Absolutely, and it's kind of what I mentioned earlier about the way of going about the deadline, where you pick exactly what you need and what you're missing, and you pay whatever it costs to do that, whether it's a first round pick or whatever it is. I saw a lot of Leafs fans on Twitter last night say, "Well, if Taylor Hall just costed a second, why didn't we do that?" But I think Taylor Hall is more of what you already have, and not so much what you're missing.
right.
That's why I like this kind of deal. Um, and we got Jimmy in the chat. Austin Wagner is a future Kraken, a guarantee now. He's asking, and I'm sure he's seen my Austin Wagner takes that I think he's a future Kraken 20 goal scorer, and I think he's referring to the Kings just announced that they had re-signed Alex Iafallo, 4 years, $4 million a year, and so he will pretty much guaranteed take up a protection spot now.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned on Twitter, the dream is one step closer. So that locks down another protection spot, pushing Wagner potentially one spot out of protection. So, what do you think, Dylan?
Yeah,
Am I being unrealistic here?
I don't think so. I think that's first off, I like the Iafallo deal for the Kings. I think that's a fair price. He's proven he can play with highly skilled players. Uh, I I I don't want to get my hopes up too much with Austin Wagner. I would love him to come to Seattle. I'm with you. I think he can be a 20 goal scorer in this league if given the playing time and opportunity. Um, it's just one of those. I don't know. I get nervous trying to count the chickens before they hatch with some of these guys. Just knowing, you know, there were some locks we thought last expansion draft process with Vegas that we thought guys were for sure going to be available, and then they weren't. So, um, but yes, I definitely think every every kind of re-signing the Kings do from here on out means that Austin Wagner gets one step closer to having to be available for the Kraken. And realistically, I don't see anybody that the Kraken would take over him from LA.
Right. And speaking of re-signings, we have some news breaking right now. Less than a minute ago, we've got Chris Johnston reporting. It sounds like Scott Lawton has a new deal in Philadelphia. So that's another huge re-signing. It's kind of like the Iafallo deal in that someone we might not have been projecting would be protected because they're a UFA now certainly will be protected. Scott Lawton, the Flyers love him. I mean, that's why they tried to get a deal done. So I'm looking at my list right here, and this is going to push someone out of protection. And maybe James Van Riemsdyk. I have him currently protected, but maybe given that contract, he moves out. Oscar Lindblom. It could be another option there.
I think
But one thing, yeah,
I was just gonna say I think they would protect him over Van Riemsdyk.
you think
Just
they would?
yeah,
Lindblom over Van Riemsdyk?
yeah, just given
Okay.
how just given the fact, the age difference and the money difference, right? Like why protect a $7 million a year deal if you don't need to?
Right. Exactly. But I think that's going to open up some more options for the Kraken. You were talking about with me the other day about how where's their goal scoring going to come from? Where are they going to get those finishers? They're going to have a lot of playmakers, might not have so many finishers. This could open it up to have more of a finisher, whether it's JVR or Voracek should be exposed. I'd take JVR over Voracek, but this could be an option for that. And something I had heard Elliot Friedman discussing is maybe the Flyers were thinking about doing the 4-4 protection option.
Hmm.
This takes that completely off the table.
Yeah, there's no way.
They're going to be a 7-3 team. We know that now.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see JVR as a member of the Kraken. If that shakes out. The other thing is, Nolan Patrick is still up in the air. He needs an
Right.
extension. I'm assuming they're going to get that done. I know there was a little bit of talk of him maybe moving today, but I'm not sure that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know that Philadelphia's wanting to give up on him already. He's only been there a couple of
Right.
years, so
You got to be very careful giving up on a player like that young still.
yeah, someone you took second overall only 4 years ago. He hasn't been that much of a bust, especially when we knew going into it all he was more of a two-way guy to begin with. So,
Exactly.
um,
And we got puck place market. That's fine. Obey Kubel is going to look great in a Kraken sweater. I agree. That would be my pick. Still, even with JVR available, I like Nicholas Obey Kubel.
yeah, yeah, he would
I
be
mean, for the money.
exactly. You don't have to worry about that contract. You don't have to worry about an aging player then, the way you would with JVR or Voracek.
Exactly. And the tough minutes that he plays right now with
Hmm.
Philly, I mean, those high defensive zone starts and his possession numbers still look good. That
Yeah,
that would be my pick still from Philadelphia, even if JVR is available. If they float Nolan Patrick, if for some reason he is available, then I'd go him, but that's still unlikely, I think.
yeah. I still think they'll get a deal done with him before the expansion draft,
Yep.
or they'll just protect him knowing they have a deal, in place. Um, let's see. Joe asking our thoughts on the Jeff Carter trade. So Jeff Carter is a Pittsburgh Penguin, something I never thought I'd say. He was
It'd be
traded for,
weird, man.
I know, he was traded for a conditional third and a conditional fourth. Um, Neither of which are this year, which is something I want to talk about. But first, uh, as far as him joining the Penguins, I think this is, basically what they realistically needed the most, which is depth at center, particularly someone who can finish. Because certainly, Malkin's out, and we still don't know how long he's going to be out. But they've had issues down the middle when either Sid or Malkin are out. Jeff Carter helps that. I think he can play on the wing. So once Malkin comes back, if you need just another finisher on the wing, you can slide Carter over there. But um, they need help in more than just this area. But I think this was realistically the place they needed it most, which was down the middle.
Right. And I think it'll be a pretty good fit there. I mean, he's not going to be relied upon to play that number two center role like he was in LA during his prime. I think he can play some more comfortable minutes, and he's still got some energy left. I think he still does have some game left. It's just it's hard to get yourself motivated night in night out when you're playing on a Kings team like that is still a ways away from contending and probably not in your time there. So I think we might see a spark from him. And I think it also works out for Pittsburgh because of the complicated cap recapture stuff. If he retires at the end of this year, they actually get a cap credit. It's a negative cap recapture penalty. So they get a cap credit if he retires at the end of this year. So maybe they'll try and convince him to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. As far as I know, he hasn't really spoken publicly about that being on the table. I would think if you only have 1 year left on your deal, you'd probably play that out. Obviously, LA did retain 50% of the salary, so even if Carter sticks around with the Penguins next year, it'll only be at roughly 2.6 million, um, which is, that's a fine number for someone of his ability and the position that he can play.
Yep.
Um, let's see. One of the earlier in the day deals that I wanted to briefly touch on was Montreal got John Merrill from Detroit, excuse me.
Right.
And I love that because I think John Merrill for years now has been super underrated as far as being this steady constant on a blue line. Again, he's not a flashy guy. He's not like a point producing defenseman, but he's always been solid no matter where he's gone, and I just feel like he's always been undervalued wherever he is. As we saw, right now he's on a contract that's paying him less than $1 million, and I think he's proven that his play is worth more than that. But um, so far NHL teams haven't seemed to think so. But I like that for Montreal. I think he'll help them out on the blue line. Obviously, they've been having issues there as far as depth
Right.
goes, and that should help fix that. And they virtually didn't really give up anything for him. So,
Well, here's the thing, though. Is he better than Victor Mete?
uh,
Because that's who they basically gave up from. They waived Victor Mete. He went to Ottawa.
yeah, I would argue so. But like I said, I'm a John Merrill guy, so
I think he's better
I
right
could be
now,
biased.
certainly.
Yeah,
But longer term, is it worth it?
I don't know. It's worth it if they can get to, if they get a playoff win or two, series wise. I mean, because I think
Right.
ultimately, if you're Mark Bergevin, that's what you need to keep your job. Like so, in that sense, from his perspective, it's all worth it. But
Right. And so Mete to Ottawa, what do you think of that fit there?
I like it. I mean, Ottawa's a young team. They need, just other young players that have potential. That they're in a rebuild. That's exactly the kind of move you'd expect them to make, and it's low risk for them. So why not take a
Right.
shot, right? I think
Now,
anytime you can get someone like that who's young and has potential for nothing, you got to take it.
yep. Um, now I have early projections here because I'm just playing around with it, but I have Mete going into that third protection spot for the expansion draft for Ottawa. Does that sound right for you? It'd basically be between him and Josh Brown, and I haven't seen a whole lot from Josh Brown that would lead me to think he should be protected. So, do you think Mete into that third spot sounds right, or do you think he could be someone who's exposed to the Kraken?
No, I would agree with that. I think Mete will probably be their third guy. Josh Brown, yeah, he hasn't really done much. He's also getting older, be 28 next year. You kind of would like to have seen something from him by now, certainly more than what he's shown. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I think Mete would be the guy.
Yeah, because he was probably going to be an option in Montreal
Hmm.
if they wouldn't have protected him. So it could have been someone for the Kraken to take a flyer on who's now probably not going to be available. Although I still want Jake Allen from Montreal. That would be my preferred pick.
Yeah, I think Jake Allen makes the most sense to take from Montreal. If Montreal was smart, they would expose Shea Weber just
Yeah, I think
because,
they
like,
will.
yeah.
I think they
But
will.
I wouldn't want Seattle taking him.
No, absolutely not. And he's part of a class of guys that teams could probably expose, knowing that the Kraken wouldn't want anything to do with the contract.
Right.
Yeah. I would add Brent Burns in there,
Yeah.
and a few other guys, maybe PK Subban, even though it's just for one more year.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think Subban's more likely to be taken than anybody, just because New Jersey has so many middling options, we'll say, like
Right.
as far as who you'd be taking. So if you have the chance to take someone with the star power of a PK Subban, it might be worth it just to help.
Just for one year, and you're going to have the cap space to make it work, and not to mention what he would do, for the fan base, everything off the ice, how
Right,
great he would be here.
the marketing opportunities and stuff, and his track record of working with communities and stuff would be
Right.
well worth it for them. Um, yeah, but Jake Allen, I mean, I Jake Allen, I think we could all see being the starter for Seattle next year. It's not like he doesn't have starting experience. He's on a totally manageable contract. The dream of him and Aiden Hill being the duo for the Kraken is still alive.
Yep. Although don't discount Vonacek.
Yeah, I haven't seen him
Or
play too much so far this year, but from what I
I
hear,
haven't either. I need to watch him more because the numbers look good.
mhm,
But I do want to kind of see because he's behind a pretty talented team, so I kind of want to see how much of that is him and how much of that is just support in front of him.
yeah, uh,
Next deal.
yeah. Should we just jump right into the big one? Or
Yeah,
the
let's do it.
All right. So, uh, yesterday, Taylor Hall was traded from Buffalo to Boston along with Curtis Lazar in exchange for Anders Bork and a 2021 second round pick. So I think this is kind of a perfect deal for both sides. I think given that Taylor Hall is going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year, so you're looking at a rental, I don't see Buffalo really getting a first for him given how poorly he's played so far this year. Um, but I also think that, you know, we know he has skill. We know he has the ability to be a top level player. We're only, what, 4 years removed from him winning the Hart Trophy, and it's not like he's that
Right.
old yet. So I also love it for Boston, who has had some pretty significant scoring trouble so far this year, and I think he helps out. He helps round out their top six in a good way, and you know, I, I don't see why he couldn't, find his scoring touch with a change of scenery. Like it's not like he's been battling through some sort of injury as far as we know in Buffalo. It's just things haven't been going in for him, and sometimes it's just bad luck, and sometimes a change of scenery helps with that.
Right. I think looking at his, underlying numbers, it seems as though he was just getting unlucky. And looking at all the circumstances around him, you can kind of see why that might be the case.
Yeah.
And I think Boston is a perfect fit for him. We talked about approaching the deadline by looking at what you're missing and addressing that need, whatever it's going to cost. And I think you have a team like, Toronto, where they're all skill and they kind of play that way. And maybe you need a Foligno to balance it out.
Mm-hmm.
Boston, as much skill as they have, that edge, that sandpaper, they have that in spades already. So they can go out and get a guy like Taylor Hall who adds to the skill. And I think he's going to be an especially good fit there for that reason.
Yeah, I mean they're kind of barely holding on to a playoff spot, which is not something I thought was going to be happening this far into a season. Granted, they've had injury issues, but yeah, you're looking at them. They only have 109 goals for so far this season. They've only scored 11 more goals than Buffalo has, right?
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and all we've been doing all year is talking about how dismal the Buffalo offense is. Well, Boston hasn't actually been really any better. Um, but I agree. I think Taylor Hall, he's just been unlucky so far this year. I don't necessarily think that he's a perennial 40 goal scorer, maybe the way that he used to be, but I don't see why he couldn't refine, you know, his scoring touch, get a couple better bounces. He'll be playing with, better teammates just with the change
Sure.
of scenery, and sometimes that's all it takes. Um, so I think it was good. I think if you're Boston, that's a fair price to pay. Like, why wouldn't you give up a second round pick to get a guy like Hall, even though it's a rental? These days, to get a top six forward as a rental, a second round pick is super cheap. Um,
Right. You can't do that every year. You can't get a forward of that caliber for a
no,
second every year.
no. So,
Um, I do want to talk about, on the other side of this deal, Anders Bjork,
mhm,
because he was someone who at the start of the season we figured might be an option for the Kraken out of that Boston forward group.
mhm.
And he's had a really underwhelming season. And, to the point where, he's not really even on my radar anymore, or he wasn't from that pick out of Boston. But now that he's with Buffalo and they're going to certainly have more limited expansion draft options for the Kraken, I still think he's on the outside looking in as far as protection. So he could be an option maybe for the Kraken. What do you think about Anders Bjork? Have you seen him play? What do you think of him?
Yeah, I've seen him play a little bit, and like you said, he's been kind of underwhelming so far this year. Um, I think he has potential, particularly as a depth guy, a bottom six guy. Um, and just like we were talking about with Taylor Hall, sometimes all it takes is a change of scenery. He's going to go to Buffalo. He's probably going to get more playing time in Buffalo, just because there's less competition there. Um, they know they're kind of out of it. I got to think by taking him along with the second instead of maybe just asking for a first straight up, Buffalo sees something in him. So that might be the only reason I would say he might not be available to the Kraken,
Right.
is if they really like him, they might just protect him. They don't have, a ton of options as far as where their protected spots are going to go. But so I guess for me, the jury's still out, and I want to see him play the next 15, 20 games in Buffalo and see how he does.
Right. And I think it's good for the Kraken as far as just getting a better read on him evaluation wise. He wasn't playing much in Boston, and certainly going forward, he wasn't going to play much. So it gives you a better look at him. And for Kraken fans, I'd suggest, as as much as this is usually not good advice, watch a Sabres game
Yeah.
and take a look at Anders Bjork and see, if he's someone you think the team should be looking at.
Yeah. And really the piece that's getting overlooked in all of this is Curtis Lazar, who's going to go to Buffalo, and he's been my guy forever, and I'm telling you, he's going to score a big goal in the playoffs this year for them.
For Boston.
Yep.
All right.
He'll score.
Dylan's got his prediction there. Curtis Lazar, big playoff goal.
Yep, it'll be probably his only goal of the playoffs, but it's going to come when they need it most. That's just the kind of guy he
Okay.
is. I remember watching so many games of him in Edmonton back when he was in the WHL with the Oil Kings. So one of the things I want to talk about real quick is the idea of, do you think picks this year are more or less valuable than they would be in a regular season, given there's, hardly any opportunity to scout players because all of the, certainly the CHL's schedule has been so, you know, shortened, uh, and we haven't had a lot of time to see guys. If you were a team, do you put more value on a pick thinking, well, I trust my scouts and we like guys that we think might get overlooked because they didn't play much this year and so there's not as much tape on them, so we can kind of maybe get value on some of the players we like because they might fall to us? Or are you kind of just like, hey, you know what, I have no idea, none of us have any idea, I'm just going to punt my picks to next season and let someone else take flyers on all these guys with limited tape?
Right. Well, if it's me, I would think that I wouldn't say for picks in general whether they're more or less valuable, but that curve, like value curve, for a pick where pick one is worth this, and then two and three and four, and it kind of levels out. I think it would be flatter this year,
Mm-hmm.
where once you reach pick 2025, it all kind of flattens out where it's worth more or less the same just because of how little you've been able to see these guys. If I were a GM, what I would be trying to do is amass as many late round picks as possible, because in a normal year, you kind of look at them at just as lottery tickets and you just want as many lottery tickets as you can because they're so hard to predict. This year, especially so. I think this year you might have a lot of guys falling into the later rounds who turn out to be really good just because you haven't had the opportunity to see them. So I would be trying to amass a lot of later round picks. And hey, maybe if there's a late first that I can trade away for someone who's really going to help my team right now, if I'm competitive, like maybe say the Leafs, I'm looking at, well, maybe I don't mind parting with that as much because people still view it as a first when really it's, might be more equivalent to a second or a third this year as far as the level of guy you could possibly get and how well you can predict who's going to be there.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say what I would do because I would really work it around kind of what my scouting department was and what the track record was as a team. If you're someone like Carolina or Tampa, I think that works perfectly because you've shown that your scouts are good at identifying value picks late in the first round or during the second round because they do it every single year. If you're someone like Buffalo, who doesn't even have, a European scout right now, and they don't really have a WHL scout, so already you're not seeing as much as you should be. I would be trying to acquire picks in 2022, seeing if you could get a higher asking price for a pick a year later, knowing you're going to still be rebuilding then. It's not like, this is the off season where you have to pull it all together. Although maybe you do if it means keeping Eichel happy. But so in that sense, I'm kind of surprised they didn't ask for a first the following season for Taylor Hall.
Right. And I would think maybe that's a price that some team would have been willing to pay, but then again, given Hall's performance, maybe not.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he finishes the season in Boston and what that's going to mean for him come free agency, because I have no idea what kind of contract I would offer him right now. I 100% believe it's mostly been just poor luck as far as his counting stats go, but at the same time, there have been times this year where he's looked, I don't know, I never want to say that players look like they're not trying, and he does look like he's trying, but he was obviously frustrated on some nights,
Right.
and that.
And that question is something that the Kraken are going to have to deal with because if they're doing their homework, which they should be, Taylor Hall has to be in consideration. He's a free agent, and he has to be someone that you're looking at. So the Kraken are going to have to decide, well, what's our number on this? What kind of term and dollars are we willing to give here for someone who, can provide a lot of offense potentially, but as we've seen this season, the potential pitfalls, it's certainly there. So if you were the Kraken, if you're Ron Francis, what's kind of the highest you'd go on a contract for Taylor Hall? And in the chat, let us know what would you
Yeah,
pay Taylor Hall? What would you be willing to give him?
the first number that pops in my head is 6.5.
6.5.
Yeah. Um,
Okay.
I
And
think.
what kind of,
I mean, realistically, ideally, you'd want it to be 4 years or less. But I think if it's going to be one of those situations where if he's tired of bouncing around because he
right?
has been so much in the last couple of years and he wants to settle down, you could probably lower that number a little bit by giving a couple extra years of term. But if he's still wanting to compete and try to win a Stanley Cup, I could see him opting just to kind of sign 1 or 2 year deals around the league, cherry picking which teams he thinks are true competitors right now.
And it sounds like it's still the case that most players don't want to sign long term right now,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're opting for these shorter deals. And
Yeah.
maybe Wall's still in that boat. I know it kind of bit him last time where it wasn't good for him, but maybe a 2-year deal with the Kraken might be something that he would consider, and then wait till the cap goes up and reconsider his options.
Yeah, I mean he's kind of stuck right in the middle of that, if you're someone who's just turning 27 this year and hitting free agency, it makes all the sense in the world only to sign a 1 or 2 year deal, wait for the cap to go up, knowing a team will still give you a big contract. As a 30-year-old, you're talking about, okay, well then I'll sign a 1 or 2 year deal and then I'll hit free agency once the cap goes back up, but I'll be 32. And generally teams aren't looking to go out and give 4, 5, 6 year big contracts to 32-year-olds. So, it couldn't
It's a
have,
risk.
yeah,
It's certainly a risk.
it kind of couldn't have happened at a worse time for him as far as having to make that decision given his age and where he's at. As far as I'm sure there are front offices that think he has just lost a step, and that's this is already he's on the decline. So it'll be
Yep.
interesting. um there was the rumors that Edmonton was potentially interested in bringing him back for this season, which I thought would have been really fun.
I don't know why you don't do it for that price if you're Edmonton.
Right, why not?
Why
I
don't you
mean,
give up a second and a I don't know who their equivalent of Bjork, maybe a Tyler Benson or something, but why don't you do that if you're Edmonton?
yeah, I don't know. I think if you're Edmonton, you have to feel that every year you have with both Draisaitl and McDavid, you have a shot at doing something in the playoffs, right? I think we could all look at that North Division and be like, well, they're not the strongest team there. They're potentially not even the second strongest team in that division, or even the third. But you have the best player on the planet. You have the guy that can go out there and on any given night just put up 5 points and take over a game. And
But enough
and
about Mason Berry. Like, let's
exactly.
talk about David Draisaitl.
Exactly. So I just think if you're Edmonton, you have to be on the lookout for that. That being said, they're not they're not like the Penguins of 5 years ago, where it's like, yes, every single year just trade away your first round pick for a rental because you're potentially that one piece away from winning it all over and over and over. So I was going to bring up the deal that they have made, which is they brought in Dmitry Kulikov for a conditional fourth round pick in 2022. And I thought that was kind of the perfect type of move for them. Go ahead, give up that mid round pick. It can become a third if the Oilers win a playoff round this year. And bring in a depth defenseman that, I said I was a big John Merrill fan. I've also been a big Dmitry Kulikov fan. I think he's very underrated in what he's done. Um, Going all the way back to when he was with the Panthers. I think people forget he was like a 19-year-old defenseman for Florida. Granted, they weren't the best Florida teams, but he's always played a mature game, and I think he's been good. The last couple of years, his analytics have been kind of trailing off, but I still like him. I think he's the kind of guy the Oilers need because they have, you know, you have Barry who's putting up points like crazy, and you have Darnell Nurse who's the one guy you can lean on to play all your tough minutes defensively. But after that, it's a mess back there. You know what I mean?
Yep. And I think you're right. That's the kind of understated move that is not going to get a lot of talk today. It's not going to attract a lot of fanfare, but come playoff time, it's going to help.
Yeah. So one of the things that hasn't happened that I think most people expected to happen is we have not seen Nashville be very active. And, you know, I think that's because they feel that they're in contention for a playoff spot and that they don't necessarily want to be selling the way we thought that they would. Um, but, you know, Matthias Ekholm is still in Nashville, and that is definitely not something I thought we'd be saying today.
Oh, absolutely. They clearly see themselves as still in the running, and I mean, they really are. They had a big win streak leading up to the deadline, and I think David Poile doesn't want to give up on this group just yet. And, Ekholm's still there, and that is really good news for the Kraken if the Predators still think, that's what their team's going to be, because now they're forced to either try and quickly sell him in the offseason, where he's not going to have as much value to a trade partner, or just hang on to him and potentially expose him in the expansion draft, which he would be a huge get for the Kraken.
Right. I mean, there's a couple things here. I think obviously he could be exposed in the expansion draft. If Nashville wants to keep him, then you're looking at a Dante Fabro being exposed in the expansion draft, who I would love for Seattle to take.
I think there's no chance. They like Fabro enough. I think it would be Ekholm exposed over Fabro, but either way, you can't go wrong.
Right. Well, so then let me bring this up. What about Ryan Ellis? Do you think there's a shot that Nashville exposes him just to kind of get that contract off the books? He'll have 6 years left at 6.25 per.
Well, Ellis was one of those guys who was also in the trade conversation along with Ekholm before the Predators started winning and realized they weren't going to trade guys. But it's clear that there's still value there, and I know some teams were reported to value Ellis higher than Ekholm. And so that tells you a first and a prospect plus. So I do think they would try and trade one of those guys before just leaving him exposed and losing him for nothing. And which one it is, who knows? But I'd have to think they would try and just make some kind of move to get out of it. What about the four forwards, 4 defense protection option? I think that they might even rather do that. Protect Ekholm, protect Fabro, protect Ellis, and then of course Yossi. And then their forwards would be Forsberg, Arvidsson, I'd say Cunnin, and probably Yarncroke. But that leaves Colton Sissons, Trennan, Nick Cousins. That might be their best move. But then you'd have to expose Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene to the Kraken. So those are the big two you have to decide. Do you want them in your future? And do you think either of those two guys, Johansson or Duchene, would be a good option for the Kraken? Obviously, those contracts potentially say buyer beware. Mm-hmm. But do you think it could be worth it for what they bring on the ice?
I do. I think it would be worth it, particularly for Johansson. I'm a much bigger fan of his than I am for Matt Duchene at this point in their careers. And yes, I do. If I'm Nashville, I probably do keep 4 defensemen, and I just go ahead and protect all 4 of those guys, and leave some of these unsavory forward contracts exposed because, why not? I think, yes, you're in contention for a playoff spot this year. I don't think even anybody in Nashville would really realistically be calling themselves, strong Stanley Cup contenders. I don't see anything changing for next season as far as that's concerned. They just don't have the forward depth. They just don't have the scoring necessary. So, how much as part of a plan of, not necessarily a full rebuild, but a retooling of your forward lines, how much does, a Matt Duchene realistically play into your plan for that? I would
Right.
argue probably not much, given his age. And yeah, if you can clear that $8 million contract, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that you're gonna have 5 years left on that contract is
It's going to age poorly.
it already has. Like
Okay. Yeah.
it did
True.
the it
It's already aging poorly stage.
yeah, 5 minutes
So a
after
couple
they signed
things.
it.
Yeah. A couple things I want to touch on. How Chen in the chat says, I like the hockey stick in RJ's background. Thank you. Thank you. There's the hockey stick. I'll bring it over. This is my hockey stick. I think I'm gonna actually go play hockey with it tonight. Yes, it's a good hockey stick.
Nice warrior.
Huh?
Nice warrior.
Yes. Got the warrior stick. I got the warrior gloves.
Are they sponsoring this live stream?
Warrior, talk to me. Give me a call.
There we go.
And then we also have some breaking news. This just reported a trade is in the works to send Sam Bennett to Florida.
Interesting.
So we talked about Florida stocking up, going for it this season.
Mhm.
That continues here.
I like that.
I really like that move for Florida. And I like it for Calgary too. I haven't seen the return. The return hasn't been reported yet. But I like it for Calgary. And the reason is the expansion draft.
Yes.
Because Sam Bennett was going to be on the outside looking in. Even we're anticipating that Lucic will waive his no move clause and not have to be protected. But if you look at Calgary's expansion draft situation, Sam Bennett is on the outside looking in as far as protection, and he would have been a prime target for the Kraken, I think. And I think the Flames knew that and knew that they wanted to get something for him now.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to. There's still value there. It is, he has never lived up to where he was drafted as far as being, I think he was taken 6th overall in that draft. But, he's only 24, which seems crazy considering how long he's been around in the NHL and kind of been around in all of our minds. But he's only 24. He's settled into this role of that kind of borderline top 6, bottom 6 guy. He can step up when needed, but ideally he's the perfect kind of third line center in today's NHL. And that's what Florida probably needs to make a realistic run, particularly in that division. Is they're going to need someone they can send out there to go up against the top lines of Carolina or Tampa when needed and be able to make them work for it. And I think that's something that Florida doesn't have a lot of right now. So, but I'm interested to see what the return is.
Over and over. Right, we've heard over and over Bennett's best work comes in the playoffs. And the Panthers are gearing up for a deep playoff run.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly, this is where it's going to help them. I am interested to see the return because something's got to be going back to Calgary. And is it something that they can protect? If it's just draft picks, then, Kraken don't need to worry about that. But if there's a player coming back the other way, they're already kind of filled up as far as protection spots. Is it someone that's going to be exposed?
Right.
Now, looking at Florida's roster to see, can they protect Sam Bennett? Because, he might still be exposed with Florida, and it looks like they will be able to protect him. They've got, I think, probably Frankie Vetrano is going to be the guy moved out of a protection spot for Bennett. That's what I would anticipate. So, and then you have also Wenberg, who are projecting to be protected, even though he's a UFA. I think they're going to want to re-sign him. He's been such a big part of that team this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think probably Bennett is most likely not going to be available to the Kraken now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think his chances of being available are much lower than they were when he was still with Calgary. Love Jimmy. Sutter's already burning bridges with players. Which is funny considering we thought Sam Bennett was the perfect Daryl
He's
Sutter
the perfect
player there,
player. Exactly. I don't know.
outside of Milan Lucic, of course.
Yes. Which yeah, I am a little surprised to see this move, but then again, the expansion draft, you weren't going to be able to keep him.
Yeah, I don't think this is a move
But
they
it was
make.
likely.
Yeah, I don't think this is a move they make if the expansion draft isn't, um, happening this offseason. I think the other thing is, I've I've talked about it before. I think if you're Calgary, you need to start looking at the idea of a total rebuild. I think if you're
Yep.
them, it's probably time to try to move on from the Monahan Goudreau pairing. Um, I know there's plenty of people in Calgary that probably don't want to hear that, but I just think it hasn't it hasn't proven anything yet in all these years, and I think while they're still young and other teams might want them, it would probably behoove them to move on from them.
Yep. I think it might be time for a bigger rebuild, but we'll see. Sutter's not really the coach that you go with if that's what your plan is.
Right. Certainly
So
not with the term they signed him to. It's not like they just brought him in to finish out the year and
right.
yeah. Um
Do you see a return on the Bennett trade yet? I haven't seen anything.
no, not yet.
And did we know we didn't talk about the that Florida Chicago deal from earlier, because that kind of laid the groundwork for this, giving up Borgstrom, who you would think you might want to protect,
Yeah,
and opening up that forward spot to maybe protect Bennett going forward.
right. Yeah, I think that's probably exactly what was happening. Is they were moving that knowing, I'm sure they were talking to Calgary at some point back then, or maybe with a couple teams, and they knew they were going to be bringing in someone that they were going to want to protect and
Right.
someone
Oh,
that they viewed more beneficial to their plans, not just this season but moving forward.
right. Just got the return on the Bennett trade. So it is Bennett to Florida for a second next year. You kept talking about next year's picks being important and the teams might want him for a second next year in 2022. And Emil Heineman, he was a second round pick last year, so he will not be expansion draft eligible.
Okay, so yeah, that's exactly what Calgary was doing then.
Yep. And I think you're going to see more of this as teams try and posture to put themselves in a better position for the expansion draft, kind of knowing who's going to be exposed to the Kraken and what they can do to kind of to get out of that.
Yeah, and I think that return makes a lot of sense too, as far as, um, in some ways you're trading 2 seconds for Sam Bennett, which I think is fair value, given what kind of role he plays as well as his age,
Right.
and it's also then not a total. But I think it's significant enough that it means Florida plans on retaining him.
Yes, agreed. And it looks like they'll have the spot to do so. I'm not sold on Vetrano as someone that should be protected, but maybe he's someone the Kraken should look at. He's, kind of
Yeah, he's still
played
in his.
there.
Yeah, he's still in his prime. He's proven that he can score goals. The contract's maybe not like the most totally friendly thing given the amount of goals he scores, but I I think he would be a perfectly fine pick for the Kraken from
Yep.
Florida.
And Jimmy in the chat pointing out Soderberg to the Avs a bit earlier as well.
Yeah.
It feels like Soderberg at one point already, right? He's
Yes.
he's returning. Right? It won't be his first stint.
No.
And you can see the Blackhawks kind of definitely trying to kind of offload guys. This season. I think Stan Bowman's had a pretty good deadline in what he's been able to do and the assets he's been able to get.
Mm-hmm. Do you
And
think?
yeah,
I was gonna say, do you think that means that they like Brett Conley moving forward more?
maybe not to the point where he'd be protected. I think. That's what I was going to ask you about is the Blackhawks protection situation for the expansion draft. You've got for forwards, you've got the obvious ones. You got Taves and Kane
Mm-hmm.
with no move clauses, DeBrincat and Strome, and then I think Brandon Hagel has kind of played his way into being almost certainly protected given what he's
I would
done.
agree with that. Yes.
And then that leaves you 2 spots and 5 guys potentially to fill them. You've got Henrik Borgstrom, who they just brought in, former first
Mm-hmm.
round pick. You've got Alex Nylander, a name we've almost forgotten about since he's been injured and hasn't really played this season.
Right.
And do they still value the upside there? And, could he be someone the Kraken could take? Then you've got David Kampf, who I've been meaning to talk about for a while. He's on my projected Kraken roster now, and I like him. He's a defensive specialist. He is not a flashy guy at all, but he has some of the toughest zone starts you're going to find, and he puts up great possession numbers. So in the bottom 6 as a center, he's also a center. I think that could be valuable.
Yeah, I still think as far as looking at these names, he's the one I would want most for Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
And then you've got Adam, yeah.
go. Oh no, go ahead.
And then you've got Adam Gaudette, who they just traded for today.
Yep. Yeah, that's
and Brett we just talked about.
yeah. That's gonna be. They're gonna be one of the more interesting teams to watch.
Absolutely. They're kind of amassing this, higher risk, high upside talent, but they've got too much of it to protect it all. So we'll see kind of which player the Kraken are able to nab off of that.
Yeah, it's almost like a New Jersey situation where there's just like
Right.
this big pile of guys that are all about the same, and it'll be interesting to see
Yep.
which ones they place value on after having them in their
Yep.
building or not. And, how much you have to read into who they leave exposed as far as Seattle's concerned.
Yep. We got Eldaro 3K in the chat. Hey there. Hi. Thanks for tuning in.
How's it going?
I think we have another minor trade. Habs getting Eric Gustafsson from the Flyers for a 7th round pick. Montreal, again, bolstering their defense.
Yeah.
Clearly, they felt there was no room for Mete, given who they plan to bring in.
Mm-hmm.
How about that Sam Bennett return being higher than the Taylor Hall return?
That's pretty crazy when you think about it.
I mean, Sam Bennett, you do have his RFA rights going
right,
forward.
I was going to say he's only 24. You have a couple more years of team control on Sam Bennett that you don't have on Taylor Hall. I think Taylor Hall was going to test free agency regardless of where he was traded to.
Yep.
I think that seems pretty certain. So in that sense, it makes more sense.
Right.
But, it'll be interesting.
We got 5 minutes.
I know.
5 minutes till the trade deadline.
I honestly,
I
know. I honestly thought there would be a little bit more happening right now. Given so much happened yesterday and then there was kind of nothing earlier, I thought we might get, a big wave late in the day here. But
well, I should explain also for people, if this is your first trade deadline, if you're just tuning in for the first time, a lot of deals will come out after that noon trade deadline time.
Mm-hmm.
They're submitted in the few minutes leading up to the deadline, so they can be submitted at any point, before noon, before that deadline, but they'll often come out, up to 10, 15 minutes afterward even. So stick with us. Even after the deadline ends, there's going to be news, there's going to be trades trickling out, and there's going to be new stuff to talk about. So we're going to keep going after noon, and we're going to talk about it because I'm sure there are going to be trades that continue to happen.
Yeah, for sure. We'll hang around for 10 or 15 minutes and make sure it's everything.
Yeah, everything has truly died down.
Yeah. So as far as Seattle goes when it comes to this kind of stuff, it'll be interesting to see. I haven't felt like, no teams are really going for it in a way that's creating a lot of, problems for them when it comes to protection. We've kind of been touching on it throughout the day. I think, one of the things we planned on doing was this Friday talking about kind of where everything is post trade deadline as far as what teams may have changed as far as our projected roster goes. And so far, not much has happened. I think I'm trying to remember back to 2017, to that deadline. as far as how much Vegas impacted it, and I feel like Vegas was impacted it a lot more. But I think this year the combination of the expansion draft with the uncertain cap situation moving forward, I think has just created an atmosphere where a lot of teams are trying to be overly cautious.
Right. But on the flip side of that, I think you're seeing teams that probably were already in a tough situation, not making moves to get themselves out of it,
Mm-hmm.
like say Nashville or Colorado or even Minnesota. With you still have the Matt Dumba question of, well, what are you going to do as far as your no move clauses? Maybe they already have a solution to that lined up. I don't know, but you're also seeing teams that are already in a tough situation, not really making those trades to get themselves out of it. And maybe you'll see that in the offseason, but you're certainly not seeing it today.
Yeah, Minnesota, I've felt all along has been one that, you know, I've been confused as to what their plan is because kind of like Nashville, it's you're looking at the playoffs, but I don't think you can realistically think that you're going to go far in the playoffs and put up uh, you're going to be a big competitor. I certainly don't think you're looking at your current situation and being like, yeah, we can beat Vegas in a first round playoff series. So why not try to protect yourself moving forward when it comes to the expansion draft? But at the same time, when was the last time the Wild were super competitive and viable, right? If they feel like this has been their best opportunity, you kind of got to take it.
And you owe something. Yep.
So,
We
and
got Ryan in the chat. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
oh yeah, I was just gonna say, and it's you're kind of like I was saying earlier with Mark Bergevin. If you're the front office and you're Boudreaux and stuff there in Minnesota, you're looking at keeping your job. So you don't want to
Oh,
just
yeah,
give up on
absolutely.
everything.
Right. And we got Ryan in the chat. Hey guys, just want to say thanks for making it easy to keep up with everything without constantly refreshing Twitter today. That's right. We constantly refresh Twitter, so you don't have to.
Exactly. That's
I have been doing that right here in front of I got the Twitter machine right here, constantly refreshing. That's how we see the breaking news on the trades. Um, yep. And let's plug it now. Follow us on Twitter at Emerald City HKY. Give us a follow. We're very active on Twitter. We've
mhm.
got reaction to all the trades there too. I've been tweeting as time has allowed
Yeah.
while I'm here. So I got a few tweets out already during this. So
And
um,
it's the same on Instagram, Emerald City HKY. You can follow us
yep,
there. Not so much breaking news on the Twitter account, but other fun stuff related to the Kraken and Seattle hockey. And if you're here and you're not a subscriber to the channel, hit subscribe because we've been putting out roughly 3 videos a week. Covering either the NHL at large or particularly the stuff related to the Seattle Kraken.
yep.
So
And we're gonna keep that content coming, and we're gonna ramp it up too. Especially as we get a roster this summer,
right,
and all stuff becomes more real. We're gonna have a lot more content for you.
right,
So there
and
it is. It's noon. There's the trade deadline. Sound the horn. I know. On the TSN Trade Center, they got a big old horn. We need to get a horn or some kind of sound effect like that.
yes, let us both in our small confined spaces just get some like air horns and just blast them.
Oh yeah, my neighbors at this apartment complex are gonna love that. Yeah, that's a good point.
um, any does it look like we're waiting on anything to be announced?
Um, let's see. Bruins are done. No surprise there.
Yeah,
Um, Zadorov stayed put in Chicago. I didn't realize they were shopping him.
I didn't either.
Sharks are done. Um, yeah, one team that's been suspiciously quiet, the Hurricanes. I really thought the Hurricanes might take a big swing here and do something.
Yeah, we saw Tampa add. We've obviously seen Florida add. Carolina has been quiet, but Carolina, arguably for those 3 teams, they're in the worst situation heading into the expansion draft.
Oh, for sure.
So I feel like that's probably playing a pretty big role in that.
Right. And I mean, add them to the teams that I was talking about that are already in a bad situation, expansion draft wise, that didn't make a move to help themselves out here. I know Hayden Fleury was rumored to be on the move a couple days ago, and nothing on that front. That would have helped, been one fewer option potentially for the expansion draft. Nothing on that. So I think we're still looking at, God, that defense core. It's going to be Jake Bean or Brady Shea or Hayden Fleury. The Kraken are going to have their pick.
Yeah.
That's still a really exciting situation. I don't think there's even going to be a whole lot they can do in the off season to make that better. I think Kraken are in a good spot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fairly straightforward situation where they're going to keep who they value most, and they're just going to have to stomach the loss of someone. That being
round picks to try and avoid it.
Yeah, I don't know that you would do that to try to protect one of those guys, though, knowing you're only losing at most one of them.
Right. Well, maybe I wouldn't, but NHL GMs seem to think differently on this sort of thing.
True. Granted, we've talked about Carolina has arguably the best scouting staff in the league. They've been one of the best drafting teams for a while now, not just nailing their first round pick, but as far as finding value lower in drafts. So I think
right.
They could have someone in their system that they feel like could step in and play tomorrow and be just as good as one of those guys.
Yep. No, they're very confident in their system, and they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Blues are done. We've got one more trade. It is Ben Hutton to Toronto. No real expansion draft implications there.
There's the Chicago trade.
Chicago trade where?
Chicago, San Jose, and Vegas in a 3-team deal.
That's right. Yeah, we hadn't touched on that one yet. Matthias Janmark, and he was someone that I thought the Kraken might look at, given his history, with. Wait, is that Janmark or Wallmark? That's a history with the Canes that Ron Francis drafted. I always confuse Janmark and Wallmark. I need to look this up now.
It doesn't look like it's.
It was Wallmark.
Yeah.
Wallmark. Okay, so Janmark to Vegas. And again, you see a team playing that intermediary role at San Jose.
I was going to say this is the second or third time we've seen San Jose just take on salary, essentially.
Yeah. And I think this is the new normal now in the NHL. I think this is going to be a fixture at the deadline. You're going to see teams doing this, and it's something I could certainly see the Kraken doing next year.
Oh, for sure. And that's not exactly like a foreign concept in sports. The NBA has been doing 3 and 4 team deals forever, and it's always just to make the money work between the two main trading partners. So I definitely think that we could see that more moving forward. And why not kind of, if you have the cap space, why not do what San Jose is doing, which is load up on some mid to late round picks for it.
Right. And the only thing to really pick up is just the owner's cash. And if you have a committed owner, who's willing to do that sort of thing, as we know the Kraken do, they're all in to do whatever they can to help the team. I have no doubt that Lewicki is willing to do that if Ron Francis feels it can benefit the Kraken. So I think this is something we're going to see from them next season, as I'm anticipating they'll have a good amount of cap space to do that with.
Yeah, they should. Kind of interesting San Jose's doing it. But
right, especially to help out Vegas here, as big a rivals as they are.
Yeah.
It benefits you, why not?
Exactly. At some point you can't not make moves that'll make your team better just because you don't like the team you're working with, right? Like that's cutting off your nose to spite your face in a pretty big way.
Exactly. One thing I want to touch on in the chat, Jimmy says, wrong stream, I know, but when you get a moment, how about your thoughts on Hideki Matsuyama's historic Masters win yesterday?
I thought it was great. I mean, every year I love watching the Masters, but I feel like the years when you have somebody who's, just over the course of really all 4 days has just been so strong. Like for me, thinking about it, I can't imagine going into Sunday of the Masters with a lead, and certainly having a big lead. You'd think that would make you feel a little more comfortable, but I really can't imagine much more of a pressure filled spot to be in all of sports, because we could talk about, like, as far as hockey's concerned, you know you're facing down a penalty shot shooter as a goalie in a Stanley Cup final game or something, but that's one moment. When you're talking about golf, or particularly the Masters, you're talking about having to play consistently 18 holes every day for 4 days, and I think that's something
Yep.
that
And
gets
it just that
overlooked.
pressure doesn't go. And
Yeah.
I think it's huge also for Japanese golf. I mean,
Hmm.
he's a real figurehead for what golf means in Japan, and I think it's great to see him get a major win. I think it's a long time coming for him. So, um, yeah, very happy for him there.
um Elliot Freeman just tweeting Barabanov to San Jose,
Oh,
which, waiting to
where?
see.
Okay.
That's actually very surprising to me. And Goodbranson to Nashville.
Oh, see that's how they're going
Yes,
all in for a cup this year, Nashville. Eric Goodbranson.
that's crazy. I'm very, very shocked to see that. No returns yet on either of those.
Antti Suomela is the return in the San Jose deal.
Okay.
Good deal for the Sharks. I know Suomela was not in their future plans. And then on the Gabranson trade, it's Brandon Fortunato and a seventh in 2023.
All right. I
So,
mean, it makes sense. If you're Ottawa, you don't really need him.
right.
He's not part of your plan moving forward anyway. I still,
No.
yeah, I really don't know why Nashville's doing this, unless Poyle just really feels that his job's on the line.
And it might be.
But
It might be. I
but
think
but
Might have been the canary in the coal mine there. If Trotz
mhm.
was still the coach, it'd be like, oh, they're just, they're
Yeah,
just going to stick with those two forever.
but you're just looking at it going, okay, sure, you might be able to stave off Chicago and keep that last playoff spot, but you're just gonna have to go play
What do you
Tampa,
do
Florida, or Carolina.
once
You're not beating any of those teams, so
no, you're running into a buzzsaw, no matter who you face.
yeah, I'm really struggling to find the logic there. As far as the other deal goes, I love Barabanov. I think he's fantastic depth guy. I'm interested that he's going to San Jose, just because I don't know that they really need him. But I
Right.
would have thought if he was on the market that someone else would have picked him up for a playoff run or something. But
What's his contract situation? Is he let's take a look. So he's expansion exempt and he is a UFA. Interesting. So he's going to be a UFA at the end of the year.
yeah, that's very surprising.
As is Suomela, I guess maybe they just figured change of scenery might benefit both guys for the rest of the year and just see what the other guys have. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
guess so. But that one's the most surprising for me.
Right. I did not see that one coming at all.
Other
Uh,
interesting thing just in the hockey world is we're approaching Milan Lucic's 1,000th game, and Jordan Stahl's
really?
1,000th game. Yeah, I thought those were both interesting, particularly because we just had Sidney Crosby's 1,000th game. So think of it, it's weird for me to think of those other guys playing as much hockey as him.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucci, he doesn't go away. It's that contract.
Yeah. Um, Not really seeing anything else.
Right. I think it's slowing down. So, okay, ultimately, how do you feel? We'll get into this more on Friday,
Hmm.
but how do you feel, without having really the chance to think about it, about the Kraken's position now versus, let's say a week ago, going into the expansion draft?
I would say that they're in a better spot than we thought they'd be in, if anything, just because of the whole Nashville situation. Knowing you're going to be able to get a good player from Nashville now, knowing you're going to be able to get a good player from Minnesota now, knowing you're going to be able to get a good player from Carolina now, right? Some of those teams that we thought might make moves to try to protect themselves from the expansion draft didn't. So in that sense, I think they're in really good shape. I would say it's not necessarily they're not in as great a position as I was hoping they'd be because we didn't see a lot of teams really try to pile on assets to make runs and stuff that would have then forced them into protecting players they otherwise wouldn't have, um, or exposing players, I should say. But I think overall it's been a good day for Seattle.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you'll see even teams like Chicago or Florida that might give interesting options to the Kraken where they're just worried about kind of what they're doing for now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're going to see a shift in which teams to look at, and that'll be something interesting to discuss on Friday.
Yeah, for sure. So make sure to tune in to the channel on Friday. We're gonna really dive into what all the moves that happened today mean for Seattle, and kind of talk about how it affects our projected Seattle Kraken roster for next season. Um, Thank you everybody for watching. Like we said earlier, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. And we plan on doing more of these live streams moving forward as big events happen. We might maybe we'll do one for the playoffs or something, but certainly we're planning on doing this for the expansion draft. So we can kind of
Sure.
react to it as things are going on. Probably the first round or two of the NHL draft when that happens. So um, I thought this has been a fun experience. We've had some good responses in the chat.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's been great seeing the interaction in the chat, and getting to interact with all of you. I want to give a quick shout out to Kraken Crew, who
Mm-hmm.
retweeted my tweet about this live stream and promoted it. You're doing great work. Big Kraken fan page. Check them out if you haven't already. I don't know how you would have not heard about them already if you're if you're a
Yeah.
Kraken fan. Doing great work, but check them out. Kraken Crew doing amazing stuff. And our projected Seattle Kraken roster, as you know, it is live updated. As soon as we finish this stream, I'm going to go update it. It'll be ready, completely up to date, probably within the hour, and I'll have that out. And then tomorrow, I'm going to put out a whole new full-length video going over what the roster looks like post-trade deadline and kind of recapping all that. So that'll be out tomorrow.
Yeah, and link to the website's down in the description below. Um, all right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.